Welcome to the New Books Network.
Hello from Brandeis University, and welcome to Recall This Book Collaboration Edition. I'm John Plotz. Along with our recent conversation with journalists Steve Fainaru and Mark Fainaru-Wada, today's conversation with the celebrated Argentinian composer Francisco del Pino asks, among other things, what it is like for musicians and poets to make work together. Recall This Book considers itself very lucky to have the conversation with Francisco, who's a guitarist and a frequent musical collaborator from his youth, as well as a composer. You may already know his debut album, Desir. If not, stay tuned to hear a little bit and then check out the show notes to learn more. And you may also have heard his work featured at one of many worldwide festivals, among them MADA, ISCM World Music Days, St. John's Smith Square in London, Samar Tonar in the Faroe Islands, or Druskomania in Lithuania. In any case, it's a joy to have him with us for this conversation today, and here we go. How did you become a composer? Was it a musical pathway for you? Was it something that started in childhood?
Yeah. Long story.
That's okay. We have a long time.
Yeah, I sometimes I feel like I really don't know. I don't come from a musical family, as you might call it. Although my mother, who didn't have a formal musical training, knew a bit of everything. So she had studied a bit of piano, she knew a bit of music theory, so actually she was my first music teacher in a very formal setting. But I was already, I think, 14 maybe.
Oh, wow.
Yeah, I was, older.
Yeah. Nowadays, I feel like they give people violins when they're 5 years old.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah, but that wasn't really the type of environment in which I grew in. My father was a professor of economics, so, and I think I got a tendency to think in numbers from him, which of course helps a lot in my composing endeavors. But it really wasn't a musical home. So why I got the curiosity to start, I don't know. But I mean, we had a couple of instruments lying around, and I guess at some point I felt curious and started making questions. What is probably interesting and a potential answer to how I became a composer.
Yeah.
So we had a couple of things laying around, a guitar, some keyboard, but I became immediately interested in knowing music theory even before I knew how to play a couple of chords on the guitar. I started, since my mom knew music theory, she knew how to read music, I would start asking questions about how things work.
Yeah.
So I think that's kind of, that says something for me. I didn't even know that what a composer was at the time.
Yeah.
I kind of became interested in knowing how things work even before being able to play, which is, kind of.
You mentioned numbers. Can I ask about math? Are you a mathematical person? Do you have a...
I mean, being in Princeton, I wouldn't call myself a mathematical. I mean, if I think among my colleagues, I think I'm one of those who has a certain inclination to think about process, pattern, numeric relationships between musical stuff. There are many ways in which you can really formalize certain parts of your process through numbers, and I like that approach. Which, of course, I try to balance with also being really sensitive to only what I hear, what makes sense to me intuitively. But yes, I'm sorry. That's why I said that I could trace those tendencies back to both my parents. But it's funny because none of them was actually a musician.
Yeah. But can we follow you used an interesting word, formalize, to talk about math as opposed to being sensitive to what you hear. And I wanted to ask, and this is as somebody who I feel like I have some mathematical intuitions and no musical intuitions, but I've sometimes heard people describe music as feeling like intuitively like math to them. I mean, I suppose that's the Bach side of things or something that Is that what you're describing, or you're describing something a little different? You're describing math as more like the rigorous side, not the intuitive side.
Well, I think they are connected. The rigorous side, I mean, what you call the Bach side, I could relate that to rigor in music composition, but also, rigor applied to a music that always wants to sound beautiful and moving, which is for me what Bach represents. But beauty, basically. But also a certain relation to something that is not, like, I don't know. I don't want to sound like super mystical. Like it's always sounding like it belongs to a place which is not human, or not only human. Like this constant question about God. I think you can also trace that with that tendency towards symbolism and abstraction that is very, very easy to detect, especially in the later works, in certain in the art of film, for instance, or the musical offering. There is these huge pieces that are like gifts, musical gifts to God, but they are abstract pieces of music which have, for instance, no. They are not written for a special instrument. They just exist on paper, and we have so many different versions of those pieces because he wasn't thinking about a specific instrument. He wasn't thinking about the sound in that way. They are more like abstract propositions in a way.
Yeah.
I think mainly I am referring to math in that sense, but also in a more direct way. I like to, when I'm writing a piece of music, sometimes I will be surrounded by charts which take account of how many notes I am using in this moment of the piece and to what amount I want to arrive at a certain time later, and I will try to find ways to formalize those processes through numeric numeric operations.
Well, there's so much in that answer. And first of all, I'm just completely fascinated at the notion that we have these pieces that Bach was composing without necessarily a particular instrument in mind as a way of thinking about abstraction. It also makes me want to ask you about other ways of thinking about the non-human in music. Like, I hope we get back and talk about whale songs and whether you're interested in them. But can I just turn the Bach question to you then? Have you ever composed music that doesn't have an instrument in mind? That's more like a proposition or abstract music?
Interesting. I no, not like that. I think that certain pieces, and perhaps especially those which come more from a, let's say, abstract way of thinking, have different potential realizations. And maybe I started by one of them, but there are others that could be explored. I think if a piece was written for these four instruments, okay, so that maybe it could be potentially realized through other medium. I don't think I consciously composed a piece of music that has no instrumentation decided on my end yet. Not that I can think of.
So that also sort of brings me sticking with the question of the human and the non-human. And this is where I think maybe the fact that I'm an English professor is relevant, because I think in words, and maybe not just even in words, but also in narrative and plot. So for me, when a piece of music occupies a certain amount of time, I see it as having sequence and structure. And as it happens, the piece of yours that I heard had extremely beautiful singing in it and words that I could respond to because they seemed to be telling a story to some extent. How do you want to just talk about how you think about that, how you think about the voice as one instrument among others, or how you think of what happens when words enter into a piece of music?
Yeah, well, yeah. Do we have like 2 hours?
Yeah, we have as much, and then we have the whales to talk about afterwards. So
I don't know. So I started when I was starting out my first, since I also didn't come from a like I said, a musical family, so it's not like I was interested in theory, but it's not like I was surrounded by classical music and that type of learning environment. I started playing guitar, playing in bands. I learned a lot from songwriters that I related to and who I worked during my teens and 20s. And so I would say that my formal composition training came much later. And most of the things I learned, even when, again, I was kind of a nerd, interested in theory and all that from the beginning. I was basically working in what we might say, like a popular music environment and playing in bands and learning from songwriters and arranging stuff through my instrument, which is the guitar, especially the electric guitar, actually. So I come from that world, let's say rock or pop.
Yeah.
That's my initial background. So I would say that when you live there, you are mostly playing songs.
Yeah.
And songs have a melody which intends to be beautiful and touching. You have words, you need to have words.
Yeah.
Which is not the case for so many other music. So I think that stayed with me always. And it's probably, part of my core, my musical core for forever. So I think that when I finally started studying composition in a more formal, structured way, and I got more into classical music and contemporary music, and then the abstraction became really a thing.
Yeah.
I think that part of what I've been trying to do is to merge those musical sides, so the abstract and the physical, the abstract and the lyrical, and that's especially true, I think, in recent years, because I've been working a lot on vocal music.
Yeah.
And this is actually the piece you are mentioning, the C, is actually the third collaboration with Victoria Coccaro, which is this Argentinian poet and friend with whom we've been working together for the last 3 or 4 years. So,
were you guys in a rock band together back in the day?
No, actually no. So in 2019, I was invited it was a commission that came from an Argentinian opera theater. They were commissioning joint commissions of a pair of a music composer and a poet. So we met around that time. We knew some of each other's work from before. The Buenos Aires and known people. We actually met. That was in mid 2019, and we created together this piece called Decir, which is Spanish for to say or to tell, which was kind of a recital of songs and poetry, 50-minute show. We have music that I composed on Victoria's texts, but she was also on stage reciting poetry. There was also like a sort of a visual design, which also was portraying some of her poetry. That was our first collaboration, and then we wrote two more pieces together. One of those is The Sea.
Could we listen to maybe the first one of these together? Is that okay? Because I love. Okay, fantastic. Okay, so we are going to hear Decir number 1, La Puerta.
Una letra sobre otra, sobre otra, sobre otra, una mancha negra, un golpe, no, no, una mancha sobre otra, sobre una letra ahora, una puerta verde, un golpe, no, 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 no. Melodía del golpe y a través de la piel una letra sobre no, 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 no.
Cool. Okay, I'm just going to read it out. So it's the door. One letter over another, over another, over another. A black stain, a strike. No. One stain over another, over a letter, now a green door, a strike. No. A melody of the blow, and through the skin, a letter over. No. No. Sounds beautiful in English too.
Really, yeah. Yeah, actually, the translator is the same that did the whole translation
Of the sea.
the sea.
Oh, wow.
Yeah, that they have been collaborating together for a while.
Yeah.
I think so. I somehow kind of the feeling that Victoria's words sound like they can be translated into English in a very successful way, because something about the rhythm of her writing, which is very synthetic, very, it's very, it's usually based in short sentences.
Yeah.
It's very synthetic. For some reason, it sounds to me like it could sound well in English, and it does.
Yeah.
So, yeah, there's something interesting there.
That's interesting. Can we just back up to thinking about listening to this together, which thank you for doing that with me, especially in a compressed form.
Yeah.
But what do you want the listener to hear in a piece like that? Like, what are you aware of when you're composing it? I know that's a huge question, but.
What do I want the listener to hear?
I mean, again, maybe this comes back to me being an English professor and how drawn I am to the words. Mm-hmm. So it was actually good to sit here silently with you listening to it, because it made me listen to the other instruments besides voice.
Mm-hmm.
But when I'm listening to something like that, the voice is so strong,
of course.
Yeah.
Yeah. And I want that to be that way. I mean, I want to have the voice at the front. In a case like this, I am thinking of these pieces as songs. At least I refer to them as songs, even if they might not follow the verse, chorus pattern. But when I think of a song, I think of a piece of music that has a living voice that is singing some text, and that establishes a relation with the listener, in which the distance is as close as possible. A song for me is something that really wants to touch the listener in a very like almost like grabbing their heart.
Yeah.
Which sometimes is not the case if you listen to an orchestral piece.
Yeah.
Right? At least to me, I don't know. I can't generalize. But So that's one intention. And of course, then comes the problem or the challenge of translating the poetry to music, which is not only setting the words to music. Like, okay, so this word will have this note.
Yeah.
I will write this melody for this sentence. It's more like it is that I have to decide if these words are going to be sung by a singer. So how do I make that translation?
Yeah.
But there's also the whole challenge of building a sonic space for those words. How will that sonic space sound like?
Yeah.
Which in the end is a sort of a sonic echo of those words. So it's really, I mean, to me, it's both fascinating and terrifying, because, especially with poetry, because they already have decided about rhythm and pace.
Yeah.
So then you step in and you layer on top of that another set of decisions.
Yeah.
But I mean, it's terrifying. It's such a beautiful challenge that I keep coming back to it.
Yeah. So do you and Victoria or another collaborator ever compose simultaneously, where the words and the music come up together, or?
Almost. Kind of, yeah. In this case, I mean, not exactly like Lennon and McCartney, who were supposed to be sitting in front of each other and completing, each other's sentence with another sentence. Not like that.
Yeah.
But at points, I mean, we try to. So this is a very long text. I think she wrote like 15 pages or something. It's, and we were working together in the sense that she was writing and I was writing the music. We had, agreed on what were the things that we wanted to write about and what were our common interests. I wouldn't say themes, but there were certain ideas that were important for both of us that would be present both in the words and the music. So then we were working together.
Can you give an example? Just sorry to interrupt, but it's fascinating because, again, to come back to how words are representative, and then when I listen to music, it feels intimate or emotional or moving, but I can't identify what it's about. So I'd love to hear what are things that
it's always, it's always this impossibility of really saying what is it about. But I don't know if it's the most interesting example, but the idea of echo was very important. The idea of a thing that keeps coming back and probably seeing with different light, but especially in longer words when you have time to make ideas come back, with time to digest them. So how a word come back or a short sentence come back in a different context and how the poem plays with that. You always do that with music. You can quote something that sounded 10 minutes ago and then it comes back with a different context. And that's one thing that was important for us as a sort of a technical device.
I've always loved that word. I don't know if it's the same in Spanish, but the word refrain in English, because it also has this sense of the verb refrain to like hold back, So it's something amazing about that quality of repetition or that it reiterates. It goes away and then comes back again.
Well, the idea of repetition is another one. And actually, the cover of the album is a pattern. It's a glacier that is made of patterns. And that was a huge thing for both of us. But to come back to your question, so we were writing at the same time and meeting often to exchange ideas, and where we were. Each of us were at a certain point.
You mentioned also that you've been thinking about these video installations for a while now too, because with the sea you had that as well. Do you see those as how do you see that question of like composing with some kind of visual accompaniment? Is it?
As a tricky one, I would say. So first, I should say that for the sea, it's funny because they sound so similar. The sea.
The seer and the sea.
And loving patterns as we do, we of course we were enjoying very much that unintended pun. So for the seed, for the album, we had a couple of kind of video clips that were originally part of the live presentation, and then another Argentinian writer, artist, Maximiliano Bellman, made a couple of videos that for two of the songs, which are available on the internet. And in the case of the sea, this recent work, Charlotte Mundi, the singer of the piece, I have to credit her for the video, which is 100% her creation, and it really shows how much she embodied the text and the musical ideas. About having video as part of the live performance of the music, I sometimes have a conflicting relationship with that because I think that video and image and music work in such different time scales that they can either work together to build a really great impression of what's going on, or they can completely screw a musical performance. You know, because I really think that we perceive those times very differently. So I probably would say that the way I enjoy that that crossing of mediums is when they, and this is very personal, probably different for everyone. When I can see those things working together as one force, it has a lot to do with time. I think. The time of the image doesn't put into tension the time of the music.
So, okay, you can totally refuse to answer this if you want, but since I do 19th century, when I think about that question of the conflict or the confluence of the image and text, I think about composers like Wagner and the aspiration to the Gesamtkunstwerk, you know, like the notion of totality. Do you? It sounds to me like you're kind of an anti-Wagner. You're like,
no. I wouldn't say that. It's just that I find it very tricky to achieve a really, like a 100% positive experience in which every layer is work. It's really helping the point come across. You know. And it's not because of me, but because of the different minds that were collaborating for this presentation that you attended of this piece, The Sea. I think that turned out really, really, really great, actually. How the text and the music and the video interacted together, and also the light design, which was very minimal, but everything I think we tried at least to have everything working towards an experience of time that was, at least placid, right? Mm-hmm. To really give time for the listener to be immersed in that sea that we were creating. But I've had bad experiences trying to make 4 or 5 different mediums collide. It could go wrong. Because there's always the risk to delivering too much information.
Of course.
Or the music becoming one. I won't say music. To have one of those mediums be sort of a background for the other, or not really saying something that is important. So
So we live in this world where everybody walks around with their music in their ears, right? Does that relate to how you think about composition? I mean, you talked earlier about the intimacy of the lyric impulse versus like orchestral command or dynamic remoteness or something. But if you do you think about the fact that people are getting it, right up inside their head? Or?
I myself, I use my headphones all the time to listen to the Spotify that I hate. So 2 different answers. One is you sometimes do what you do, which is different than the thing that you, as a consumer, use. You don't necessarily write a piece of music thinking how you yourself consume that piece with your headphones and on your cell phone. I am, of course, aware of how things are, how the listening experience takes place usually. Sometimes it's just very sad because a lot of the detail that goes into a recording, for instance, is lost. and that's simply a thing that happens, and it is a bit sad. Like, okay, so a lot of, for instance, we were listening through the cell phone, and there's a bass drum. The frequency is super low.
Yeah.
Cell phones don't produce those frequencies in an accurate manner, so we are losing a lot of the body of the sound. It's just what it is, I guess. On the other hand, I don't know, being able to having access to so many. Maybe this is not related with your question, but the amount of access that we have and the portability, of course, it's positive in so many ways that we couldn't only complain about music and cell phones, but yes, it's sometimes a bit like a lost opportunity when you listen to a piece and have a lot of care in being how it was recorded, and then those details are not really there for many listeners.
Yeah. So, Francisco, I have one final question for you, which is just where do you see your own composition practice headed? I mean, do you have a vision of sorts of things you want to do in the short term, medium, long term?
I have to come up with a dissertation.
Okay.
I don't know. I know that. Like I said, I've been writing a lot of music for voice recently. So that means thinking a lot about text, thinking a lot about poetry, how those mediums differ, how to what extent they are similar, the translation from one to the other, and that along with a type of collaborative work, a type of collaboration in which there is in this case a poet present, but could be a visual artist present. That's a world in which I like to live. Probably more than just writing a piece in complete isolation in my studio for whatever instrument it is. But it's of course I do that, and we probably keep doing that. But being immersed in a composition project that involves more people, different ideas on how to deal with time, sound, image. It's a space that I love taking part into. So I will probably love to explore more of that.
So is it fair to say your teenage years as a rock and roller left the mark on you?
Absolutely. and I the other day I was chatting with a colleague in the department. We said the same. Like, you became a musician because you loved what the feelings that music gave you, but you were also wanting to spend more time with these dudes, with your friends, because of how they were as a musician, but also because of how they were as a person. So maybe the music, we can figure out the music later, but we want to spend more time together. And in a funny way, 20, 30 years later, that comes back as a will to spend more time doing things that are not only your own, but more like a more complex body with different minds involved. Yes, definitely.
I actually think that's a beautiful personal connection to end on, because I said that I don't know anything about music, and it's true, but in college, the most important thing I did was I was on the radio station, and I was on the rock and roll / punk rock Record Hospital, it was called. And it's what you just described of wanting to spend time with that bunch of guys and girls, just that was my group, that was my community. And now for, whatever it is, at least 30 years later, probably 40 if I calculated it out, but let's say 30. 30 years later is that I like spending time with other people talking about poems and talking about novels in the same way that we used to talk about songs. So music, talking about music, like explaining why we loved or arguing about what we loved and why we loved it, probably is what gave me the vocabulary for what I do now, which is,
Yes.
the same thing with artwork. So,
Yeah.
so that's nice to think about, that way in which the things that we do when we're, say, 15 to 25, every one of those years hits us so deeply. We just don't know how. It's clearly forming us, but it might take 2 decades to figure out what the formation is.
Yeah. And you never know at that moment. You always know, like looking back. But I mean, I don't know. I am enjoying realizing that happens. It's I don't know. In a way, it makes the universe makes more sense, right?
Yeah.
And of course, those formative years are also, it's your history, your family's history, and whatever you are doing, creating, in this case, finding that has a connection to those roots is to me, is very moving and an influence. It's a way of also thinking forward. Okay, so what do I do with this? Because this is really important to me.
Yeah.
So I have to pay attention and listen and do something with this. Yeah. So
cool. Yeah. Francisco, thank you so much for taking the time to talk with me. It's a great pleasure.
Thank you again for having me.
Yeah.
Recall This Book was founded by Elizabeth Ferry and me, John Plotz. It is sponsored by Brandeis and the Mandel Humanities Center. Sound editing is by Naomi Cohen, website design and social media by Miranda Puri of the English department. We're eager to hear your comments, criticisms, and thoughts. If you liked what you hear, please subscribe, rate, and review us on Apple Podcasts or wherever you get your podcasts. From all of us here at RTB, thanks for listening.